Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to continue to read The Sleeper Awakes and possibly rewind time if we find a good spot to do that. So, let's get going. A crowd of people surged and roared, and Graham saw a vast black screen suddenly illuminated in still larger letters of burning purple. Annuities on the proprietor. X5 PRG? The people began to boo and shout at this. A number of hard-breathing, wild-eyed men came running past, clawing with hooked fingers at the air. There was a furious crush about a little doorway. Asano did a brief, inaccurate calculation. 17% per annum is their annuity on you. They would not pay so much per cent, if they could see you now, sire. But they do not know. Your own annuities used to be a very safe investment, but now you are sheer gambling, of course. This is probably a desperate bid. I doubt if people will get their money. The crowd of would-be annuitants grew so thick about them that for some time they could move neither forward nor backward. Graham noticed what appeared to him to be a high proportion of women among the speculators, and was reminded again of the economic independence of their sex. They seemed remarkably well able to take care of themselves in the crowd, using their elbows with particular skill, as he learnt to his cost. One curly-headed person caught in the pressure for a space, looked steadfastly at him several times, almost as if she recognized him, and then, edging deliberately towards him, touched his hand with her arm in a scarcely accidental manner, and made it plain by a look as ancient as Chaldea that he had found favour in her eyes. And then a lank, grey-bearded man, perspiring copiously in a noble passion of self-help, blinded to all earthly things, save that glaring bait, thrust between them in a cataclysmal rush towards that alluring ×5 PRG. "I want to get out of this," said Graham to Asano. "This is not what I came to see. Show me the workers. I want to see the people in blue. These parasitic lunatics." He found himself wedged into a straggling mass of people. Unfortunately, this is really early on in the episode. Chapter 21. The Underside. From the business quarter they presently passed by the running ways into a remote quarter of the city, where the bulk of the manufactures was done. On their way the platforms crossed the Thames twice, and passed in a broad viaduct across one of the great roads that entered the city from the north. In both cases his impression was swift, and in both very vivid. The river was a broad, wrinkled glitter of black sea water, overarched by buildings and vanishing either way into a blackness starred with receding lights. A string of black barges passed seaward, manned by blue-clad men. The road was a long and very broad and high tunnel, along which big-wheeled machines drove noiselessly and swiftly. Here, too, the distinctive blue of the Labour Department was in abundance. The smoothness of the double tracks, the largeness and lightness of the big pneumatic wheels in proportion to the vehicular body, struck Graham most vividly. One lank and very high carriage with longitudinal metallic rods hung with the dripping carcasses of many hundred sheep arrested his attention unduly. Abruptly the edge of the archway cut and blotted out the picture. Presently they left the way, and descended by a lift and traversed a passage that sloped downward, and so came to a descending lift again. The appearance of things changed. Even the pretence of architectural ornament disappeared. The lights diminished in number and size. The architecture became more and more massive in proportion to the spaces as the factory quarters were reached, and in the dusty, biscuit-making place of the potters, among the felspar mills, in the furnace rooms of the metalworkers, among the incandescent lakes of crude Edomite, the blue canvas clothing was on man, woman, and child. Many of these great and dusty galleries were silent avenues of machinery. Endless raked-out ashen furnaces testified to the revolutionary dislocation. But wherever there was work, it was being done by slow-moving workers in blue canvas. The only people not in blue canvas were the overlookers of the workplaces and the orange-clad labour police. And fresh from the flushed faces of the dancing halls, the voluntary vigours of the business quarter. Graham could note the pinched faces, the feeble muscles and weary eyes of many of the latter-day workers. Such as he saw at work were noticeably inferior in physique to the few gaily dressed managers and forewomen who were directing their labours. The burly labourers of the old Victorian times had followed that dray horse and all such living force producers to extinction. The place of his costly muscles was taken by some dexterous machine. The latter-day labourer, male as well as female, was essentially a machine minder and feeder, a servant and attendant, or an artist under direction. The women, in comparison with those Graham remembered, were as a class distinctly plain and flat-chested. 200 years of emancipation from the moral restraints of puritanical religion, 200 years of city life, had done their work in eliminating the strain of feminine beauty and vigour from the blue canvas myriads. To be brilliant physically or mentally, to be in any way attractive or exceptional, had been and was still a certain way of emancipation to the drudge, a line of escape to the pleasure city and its splendours and delights, and at last to the euthanasie and peace. To be steadfast against such inducements was scarcely to be expected of meanly nourished souls. In the young cities of Graham's former life, the newly aggregated labouring mass had been a diverse multitude, still stirred by the tradition of personal honour and a high morality. Now it was differentiating into an instinct class, with a moral and physical difference of its own, even with a dialect of its own. They penetrated downward, ever downward, towards the working places. Presently they passed underneath one of the streets of the moving ways, and saw its platforms running on their rails far overhead, and chinks of white lights between the transverse slits. The factories that were not working were sparsely lighted. To Graham they and their shrouded aisles of giant machines seemed plunged in gloom, and even where work was going on the illumination was far less brilliant than upon the public ways. Beyond the blazing lakes of Edomite, he came to the warren of the jewellers, and with some difficulty, and by using his signature, obtained admission to these galleries. They were high and dark, and rather cold. In the first, a few men were making ornaments of gold filigree, each man at a little bench by himself, and with a little shaded light. Excuse me. The long vista of light patches, with the nimble fingers brightly lit and moving among the gleaming yellow coils, and the intent face like the face of a ghost in each shadow, had the oddest effect. The work was beautifully executed, but without any strength of modelling or drawing. For the most part, intricate grotesques or the ringing of the changes on a geometrical motif. These workers wore a peculiar white uniform, without pockets or sleeves. They assumed this on coming to work, but at night they were stripped and examined before they left the premises of the department. In spite of every precaution, the labour policeman told them in a depressed tone. The department was not infrequently robbed. Beyond was a gallery of women busied in cutting and setting slabs of artificial ruby, and next these were men and women working together upon the slabs of copper net that formed the basis of cloisonne tiles. Many of these workers had lips and nostrils a livid white, due to a disease caused by a peculiar purple enamel that chanced to be much in fashion. Asano apologized to Graham for this offensive sight, but excused himself on the score of the convenience of this route. "This is what I wanted to see," said Graham. "This is what I wanted to see." trying to avoid a start at a particularly striking disfigurement. She might have done better with herself than that, said Asano. Graham made some indignant comments. And with that, we come to the end of the episode. So, I will say thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.